Hi, Year 7 and 8. Welcome back, Mr. Palmer, for the second part of this week's lesson. So I've called this part the aftermath and investigation. So it's the other parts of the story. And again, we're going to look through some quotations and do some explosions on them in readiness for writing about them next week. So a couple of definitions. I realised while I was recording the first half that I hadn't um, done these. So just as a recap for you, because I know you've done these in class, a quotation are words that are taken exactly as they are written from a text. It doesn't have to be speech though; it can just be part of the text. But as it happens, I'm not asking you to select quotations. I've already selected them for you, but just so you're aware that that's what quotation means. And connotation are the thoughts and feelings we associate with words. Okay, so just a couple of definitions there. If you want to write those down, you can pause there and do that. And then we'll go on and we'll see how you did with the quote explosion I left you with at the end of the last lesson. So, all right, she told herself. So I've killed him. So I think what I would be picking up on here is how calm she comes across. The realization that she's murdered her husband. So I might pick up on the word I've killed him. So killed is obviously she hasn't said murdered, but killed is an active verb there, which would be telling us that she's done it. I've done it. So she's aware of the fact that she's responsible for her husband's death. And again, I might pick up on these short sentences that make it all quite matter of fact. It's not an emotional realization that she's having at this point. She's just sort of summing up what's happened. So again, it's a bit of an insight into Mary Maloney's head at this time, that she's just seeing things as how they are, the same as when she walked up to her husband. She didn't shout at him, she didn't cry, she didn't tell him off, she just bonked him over the head with the frozen leg of lamb. And in the same way, after she did it, she just says, "Oh, I've killed him." It's not until later that we begin to see emotion from Mary. So I'm going to run through how to do quote explosions again a couple of times, and then, as I did before, start taking away some of those levels and letting you do it yourself. So here's our next quotation. She sat down before the mirror, tidied her hair, touched up her lips and face. She tried a smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. So if you want to pause there and write that one down. And if we look at it, the words I've picked out for this one are tidied. I've picked out this phrase here, touched up her lips and face. Picked out tried a smile, the word peculiar, and she tried again. And I'll tell you now why I've selected these parts. So I said Mary's tidying up her physical outward appearance in order to present to the world that everything is normal. So no matter what's happening inside with Mary, that she might just actually beginning to realize exactly what's happened and how big it is, to the outside she's going to look perfect. Her makeup's going to be great, her hair's going to be perfect. So she's trying to present to people exactly the same image she always has done. But this adjective for the smile, the peculiar, shows that actually inside, internally, her emotions, she is beginning to struggle with what happened. Because the smile is the last part of it, isn't it? The smile is the part that shows other people, sorry, that I'm fine, everything's good, and she's not quite getting there yet. And both times that the smile are mentioned, I just thought it's worth pointing out she's determined to get it right for the reasons I just said. She keeps on practicing it until she gets the smile right. She doesn't think she can go out and face the world, because Mary's going to have to do a big thing here. She's going to have to lie to people and get away with murder. And at the same time, she's going through a very big internal journey, because everything that was safe for her, the routine, her husband, the house, making dinner, everything, all of that's gone, and she's left alone, and she's about to have a baby. So there's a lot of emotions going on with Mary here, and this section helps us to see that. So if you pause to catch up on any writing you're doing there, and we'll move on to the next one. So this is when she's talking into the mirror. and practicing going to see Sam the greengrocer or the grocer. She rehearsed it several times more. So I've picked up rehearsed there. And I want you to have a go on that one. What does the verb rehearsed suggest about what she is planning to do? So pause there, have a go, and then I'll talk you through it. So I hope you had something along these lines. So there's one version of rehearsed where it's a bit like her practicing the smile. So she's just going over it again and again and again. However, the verb rehearsed has connotations of theatre and performances. So it suggests that what she's going to do is actually a bit of a performance. And we can link that also to the fact that she put on her makeup earlier, a bit like when you go on stage, you put on makeup and it's a performance. You're pretending to be someone else. And for Mary, she is going to be pretending to be someone else, not because she's an actor, but because, as she discusses, if she's caught and convicted of murder, because of the time it was written, she could possibly be given the death sentence. So that word, instead of practiced or instead of tried, is very deliberately chosen to make us think that Mary is giving a performance in the next part of the story. I'll let you pause there to catch up if you need any other, if you want to write any other bits down. Now I've skipped quite a bit because I'm really trying to look at Mary in this lesson and think about Mary's role. And we have a lot of stuff in the middle where she does her performance with Sam. And when she calls the police, and we see the sort of performances, but it doesn't really let us know what's going on with her. So after the police have come, we then have her saying this to the investigator: "Would you mind giving me a glass?" And then he hands her a glass. So I want you to try this one yourself. How does this differ from how drinks were served at the beginning of the story? What does this suggest about how Mary has changed? So do an explosion of this quote. You can pause there and then I'll talk you through it. So again, you might have slightly different responses. That's fine, but here's what I think. At the beginning of the story, without even being asked, Mary handed her husband a drink. That's what she did. That was their routine. Whereas at this point, firstly, she's asking someone to give her a drink. This is Jack she's asking. But also she's having a drink served to her. This isn't something that happens in Mary's life or ever has happened. So she's starting to become a bit more empowered by what's happened because she's aware that she's murdered someone and got away with it. So, would you mind giving me a drink? He handed her the glass. Note how Jack doesn't question it um, or ask what she wants or argue. He does it straight away. But we could also talk about how the fact that she says, "Would you mind?" almost makes it sound like he's doing her a favour. So much like Mary thought she was being the obedient wife and helping her husband by having his drinks, by hanging his coat up, by having dinner ready for him. Jack thinks he's doing the same thing. He thinks he's helping Mary out. And actually, the person in charge of this situation is Mary. She's manipulating Jack to make him think that she's helpless when in fact she isn't. And that all works into why she ends up getting away with the murder at the end of the story. So I'll let you pause there and carry on your notes there. Move on to another quotation. And here we have one from Jack. So I've said as your prompt question here, what's funny about this line? Jack Noonan says it about the murder weapon as the police sit around the table eating. What does it suggest about the police? So I'll let you pause there and have a think about it. And if we talk about that, so there's a joke here, isn't there? Because when Jack Noonan says it's probably right under our very noses, he's using a metaphor, isn't he? He doesn't think that the murder weapon is actually underneath his nose. It's just a figure of speech that means it's right here. We've seen it. We can't work out where it is. The joke, the writers intended, is that it is quite literally under their noses because they're eating it while they're talking. So he's putting the food into his mouth. It's passing under his nose as he says it. So even though all these police officers and detectives who are experts in catching murderers and finding murder weapons are around the same table. Not one of them has twigged on that what they're eating is in fact the murder weapon. And it suggests quite a lot about the police. It suggests that they're not looking in the right place. They're not thinking through the possibilities. But it also, they're not meant to be sitting there eating food and drinking. And this is one of their friends whose murders they're investigating. It's not just a random person. It's one of their colleagues and friends. So it does suggest quite a sort of sloppiness that they're not really bothering to do their job properly, even in a case when it's their own friend. I'll let you pause there and write that one up. We'll move on. And obviously the very, very final line in the story is, and in the other room, Mary Maloney began to giggle. So for this one, I want you to think about, why does she start giggling? What does this suggest about her now? And are there different possible answers to these questions? I'll let you pause there and have a go at that one. And again, so why does Mary start giggling? So on one level, Mary's giggling because Jack said it might be under our noses, and she knows it. She knows it is. So she might well be giggling at the joke, or at the funny thing that Jack said, because he doesn't realise. However, I think it also suggests a few things about what might be going on in Mary's mind. So one thing is that she could be in shock, and she's reacting to the inappropriateness of what Jack said by giggling because she doesn't know how to respond, for example. It could be that actually her mind slipped completely now and she's starting to go a bit mad, and she's giggling because she's sitting there going mad. It could be that she's so happy with herself and arrogant because she's got one over on the police that she's laughing a sort of evil genius laugh. So there are loads of different answers to this, and Roald Dahl deliberately doesn't let us know which one of those it is. Because it's down to us and how we read the story and how we read that relationship. As readers, our reaction to Mary killing her husband could have been all sorts of different things. We might have been horrified by it. We might have cheered for her because her husband was awful. We might, I think most of us, be somewhere in the middle where we say, well, he didn't deserve that, but he was a rotter. And we might be worried about Mary because what's her life going to be like now? And again, at the end of the story, he's left us with all these options. So that was quite a lot I said there, but I'll pause there and let you write up some of those answers now. And that's the last of the Mary quotations, the quotations relating to Mary and her change as a character. And next week we're going to be doing some writing about about Mary and how she changes. We'll be using these quotations, but I wanted to do some more challenging ones. I wanted to think about some bigger ideas because that's what we do at King Alfred's. And I know that as year 7 and year 8, you've been really good at discussing those big questions and thinking about those big ideas. So we're just going to do a couple now that are a bit bigger than that and make us think about maybe the context in which it was written. So here's the first one. Jack Noonan asked if she wouldn't rather go somewhere else, to her sister's house perhaps, or to his own wife who would take care of her and put her up for the night. So for this one, I want you to have a think about what do we notice about the people that Jack suggests can look after Mary? What does this say about the society in which they live? And how does this link to Mary's actions at the very beginning and the very end of the story? So pause there and do a quote explosion on this one. And here's what I hope you noticed. Jack Noonan instantly suggested that the people who would be able to look after Mary were both women. And it does suggest that the society in which they live is one where women are expected to look after other people, and men are expected to do jobs and to investigate things if they're police. So women have a role in the society in which this story was written, which was quite a few decades ago. And how does it link to Mary's actions at the very beginning, at the very end of the story? Well, at the start of the story, Mary was happily getting ready for her husband to come home and to feed him and give him drinks and to act as his wife. That was what she was planning to do the evening, and she was happy about that. She was content in her role in society. And at the end of the story, Mary turns around and starts serves the murder weapon up to the police, and they assume that this is all absolutely fine. This is normal. Because they assume that Mary just wants to look after them because they're men and she's a woman. So she uses their expectations. Notice Jack has the same expectations. He talks about her sister and his wife. They are the people who should be looking after someone, not a man. So Mary uses those expectations to get away with murder by having the police eat the murder weapon because they can't for a second think that it could possibly have been her. I'll let you pause and write that down. And then we're just going to have a look at one more quotation today because it's been quite a lot to get through today. Again, this is one of Jack's quotations. Get the weapon and you've got the man. What mistake is Jack Noonan here? How does it reflect on society in which the story takes place? Apologise, I've missed a question mark out there. I'd get tell myself off for that. But there we go. So if you pause there and do a quote explosion on this one. Now, I hope after our last one you got this fairly easily. The mistake here is that Jack can't begin to think that someone who would kill another person would not be a man. Get the weapon, you've got the man. To some extent, I think Jack says this quite a lot. He's a detective. Whenever he's at murders, I think he probably says this same thing. But it doesn't even enter his head that the person who killed Mr. Maloney could possibly be a woman. It's got to be a man. And that, again, reflects on the society in which the story takes place. Because he doesn't consider the alternative. He doesn't think that it would be possible his wife would kill him, or there would be any reason for his wife to do so. So just two fairly bit more challenging quotes at the end of the lesson there. So if you want to write down what you've got on that one, you can. That's the end of the lesson for this week. So you should have several pages of nice notes about lots of different quotations. And as I said, next week we'll go through writing some analytical paragraphs about them. Look after yourselves for the week. Goodbye.